Welcome to episode 45 of the Voices of Boyle podcast. It's nice to be back after a little break. Fair play to Carlo for holding the fort. It feels like a long time since I've been on and got chatting to a guest. But I'm delighted today to be back and chatting to Dermot Leyden. Although he's originally from Arigna, Dermot is a long-time resident of Boyle and a familiar face that everyone knows. In this chat, we talk about Dermot's love of photography, his love for Boyle and his love for Arigna. We also chat about his two Facebook pages, the Memory Radio Boyle and the Best of Memories, and how they came about. We also talk about Dermot's broadcasting career and his escapades working on Shannon's Side back in the station's early days. We talk about his love for radio and what it took to create an internet radio station back in the day. And finally, as he is one of Boyle's most well-known DJs, it wouldn't be a proper chat if we didn't dive into some of the shenanigans that used to go on in Parker's and the Royal Hotel. So grab a cuppa and enjoy the chat with Dermot. Welcome to the Voice of the Boyle, Dermot.
Well, it's lovely to be here. Thank you very much, Florence. Lovely welcome. Lovely. We were just talking about the equipment. Here's lovely setup.
Lovely setup. Simple but effective.
Very effective. And that's, I suppose we're going to talk about how the Facebook page came about. And these things are kind of interconnected when you hear what I was about. So I always had a love of radio. Mm-hmm. And I think that came from my granddad had an old valve set, an old valve radio. And when he would be tired of listening to RTE, take the chance of, twisting the dial and going to another station. And I was fascinated, especially if this was in the evening. The radio stations from around Europe were coming in on medium wave, and you had all this lovely illuminated sign and all these things like Normandy and Luxembourg and Oslo and Helsinki and even up at the top of the band, the trawlers. And you could actually listen to, if you were near the sea, the trawlers actually used that band. And one time a pirate radio station I worked on, used that just on the edge of that band, up at the top of the medium wave band. And we used to be getting requests from fishermen.
Are you serious?
Yeah. And that kind of would kind of, there's sometimes you get a freak thing where signals will travel well out of their locality. And that really, I think, even spurred a little bit of an idea of travel. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I might be in a city and think, I remember seeing that on the old radio dial,
So isn't that gas, Dermot? So back then when you were listening to the radio, say watching your granddad change the channel, How old were you back then?
I was only, as to say, knee high to a duck.
So I suppose you were fascinated.
Maybe about 5 or 6, yeah.
Wow. So I suppose you were fascinated, like that this was actually coming in from a different country. Probably hard to understand.
I still, funnily, will listen to the shipping forecast on BBC Longwave. And there's a guy there, he used to be on RTE, called Al Ryan. And he has the most tremendous broadcasting voice. And there's something about that, the whole sound of there's a tradition sort of the shipping forecast and its areas. And you just think about that's coming across the sea, across land. And there's something a little bit magical about it, just a touch of it. And that always gave me that kind of graw, as we'd say in Irish, a love of it. And that progressed then when I started to hear the pirate radio stations. And Radio Caroline was the first, but actually there were other stations like Radio Dublin, and I remember there was a station opened up for a while in Sligo, and tuning into those, there was something really exciting about it. They were so different, and that's what led me into when the Toastal Festival was on in Drumshanbo. I got involved, was just asked if I could do a spot. I was only in my teens, but it was a great thing because they wanted everybody involved. And so that's how I got involved with the radio side of it. And so we go back like to the Facebook thing that I was seeing now in 2010, that was around then, that the radio stations that had started out as very traditional analog studios, playing records and all the rest of that, that was disappearing. And I was talking to a friend of mine who was in the trade, and he was telling me how they were taking out all the old equipment and it was all replaced now with, you know, the keyboard and mouse. So I managed to get my hands on some of that old equipment. And I had it laid out on the table. And I was looking at this and I thought, wouldn't it be brilliant if you could go back to that simple studio, just playing a vinyl record? And vinyl was disappearing at the time and gone really to, people weren't buying records on vinyl. It's not like now. So I thought, I have the vinyl, I have the studio, and could I make a radio station? And licensing as regards to FM, anything like that, that was a no. But you had internet radio emerging. And I researched into it and I found, yeah, I could do this without breaking the bank. So I put together an internet radio station. And, you know, in one way it sounds really big, but it wasn't. It was just a laptop computer. And I was using my PC to record onto, and then I'd edit the shows.
And would you have a voice part in that as well?
Oh, I
Dermot?
would, yeah. I did shows and I would do promos, and the name, you see, I came up with for the radio station. I originally wanted to call it Memory Radio.
Yes.
But that name was taken by a German language station. So I said, well, it's going to be in Boyle. Let's call it Memory Radio Boyle. And MRB roles, it all worked. So I would do promos and say, you know, coming up, we'll have this. And what I seen was, you know, media is very hungry. And keeping something going as the internet station was 24/7. Providing all the shows myself, that wasn't feasible. And then to get in people to do programs, that was getting very complex. And at this stage, it was still only a test transmission to see would everything stay working. And you were dealing with new technology with the internet station and old stuff. You know, this equipment was old and could pack
something was bound to go wrong.
Bound to go wrong. A little puff of blue smoke, and that was, you know, the end of that day. So I'd thought about this and I said, why not bring back the actual radio stations? And I was always a big fan of Radio Luxembourg. And Radio Luxembourg then merged with RTE here. They had a joint venture with Atlantic 252. And so that was a hugely popular station. I thought each station kind of covered an era. Radio Caroline would cover the 60s, Luxembourg the 70s, and into the 80s. And then Atlantic 252 opened in 89. So it comes in through the 80s, but mostly for the 90s. And that was my kind of music choice. And this was brilliant because I was able to get the jingle packages and recordings of the programs. But the quality wasn't great because these would be a lot of off-air recordings. And so I would be able to use the voice, but the music was very iffy. So I'd stitch in an MP3 in where the music would be. And I was doing all of this like on a computer editing multi-channel thing, a thing called Audacity is what I was using. And so I had the product. It sounded brilliant. And I would do shows, promos, jingles, and say today we're featuring, you know, Atlantic 252. And it was all on air and working fine, but the listeners weren't there. I was saying, like on Dragon's Den, all this was going well till you showed the
show us your numbers.
Show us your numbers.
Show us your numbers.
The numbers were not adding up. They were not there. So I was talking to my girls, and they said, "Well, Dad, why don't you go on Facebook? It's really coming in now."
And what year was this, Dermot?
That was around 20. I'd say I was a year dabbling with the station, and kind of, you know, with the years change. Maybe I started in late 2010 at it. So we're into 2011 at this stage.
So Facebook was just getting big at that time.
Just getting big. Facebook was and this is where you should be, especially for an internet radio station.
Yeah.
So that's how the Facebook page Memory Radio Boyle came to be there. It was really for the internet radio station.
So you set that up in 2010?
2010.
Wow.
Yeah. But at that time, I was using a profile page because really the business page and all of that community and all of those things weren't really, I don't know even if they had them at that time, but they were very new if they were around at all. And so I had a profile page and it was all to do with the internet radio. And I moved out into, I was on making blogs on Blogspot, and I was on Twitter, and I was on Google Plus, was very new at the time, and it helped get you onto Google. And for people searching, it would bring you up in the rankings. So all was great apart from the numbers.
Yes.
And again, it didn't attract very much interest. I kind of would say a working title was "Thanks for Not Listening." And in a way it did pay off, because what happened was there was no one taking any interest in the Memory Radio Boyle internet station and Facebook page. But as soon, what actually happened was I'd been on about a photo I had to a friend of mine. So could you email me that? And I did. And when I had the photo up there, having sent the attachment, I thought, well, you know what? Let's put up a photo and see how it does, an old photo. And that just took off like wildfire. That's where it all started. So, it was a kind of a happy accident. Thanks for not listening. And even whenever I'd mentioned the radio station, no, I'd put up another link and say, well, we have a show now. Today, we'll have Charlie Wolf on Atlantic 252 from 1991, we'll say. No. And I think at that time I was a little bit ahead of the curve. There was a few things going on with the radio station itself. Apple, there was a clash with their software, and an iPhone would not listen to my radio, was the host I had. And it was the same for an awful lot of internet stations at the time. You had to choose whether you were Android or Apple. And for me, there was no choice. I was Android, and that was that. So you were limited with listeners. And I think the age group that I was targeting were not into internet radio and never really did get into it.
They mightn't have even been on Facebook at that time, Dermot, back then.
You wouldn't, it was younger people. And definitely the demographic was younger people. And it was amazing, though, that they loved the old photos.
Yeah.
And that was really catching on.
So did it eventually, do you think, over the years, 2010, so we're 2024 now, obviously, so that's 14 years.
Yeah.
So do you still put up the shows, Dermot, on Memory Radio Boyle, or is it more the photos?
It's all photos
all
now.
Photos.
What happened was, when I looked at the costings, I happened to meet some relations of mine and their IT friends, and one of them had done actually a feasibility study on an internet radio station to bring it up to the level that you'd want to be if you were going to really promote it and put it on the local media and really put it out there. You had to have the product really right, and the costs were just prohibitive. And you were in recession times. This was austerity Ireland. And everyone was fighting for that pie of advertising revenue. And businesses themselves were consolidating and cutting down expenses. And whereas they might see it worth their while to advertise with an established broadcaster, something that was a bit out there like an internet station, it was difficult. And you didn't have the listenership numbers to back you up either.
For the proof.
Yeah. And it was chicken and egg. You needed the good product to get the listeners. And there was going to be a huge amount of work involved. And what I seen it was going to kind of turn into was not my kind of vision of the bringing back old radio stations and being a music-based station. You were going to become more a community-based station.
Yes. And with that too, I suppose, with the pressure to create revenue, it might have taken you totally on a different path to what you had set out to do. And unfortunately, I suppose that's what happens with a lot of businesses or a lot of ventures like that, is you have to concentrate then on, how do I make money? How do I get money into this?
That's the thing. And the love goes out of it. And
it does.
You know, it changes sort of from being a pleasant hobby to having to do things. I could do it when I felt like it. And the nature of being able to record, you know, and then come back and edit. And there's a big difference too in being live on air. And I just felt, that this was not going to go the direction I wanted. And I'd worked on local radio and I'd found that was becoming more journalistic. And I'm not a journalist. I trained in that area, worked in it, but never took to it.
It wasn't for you.
It wasn't for me, you know. And I think that's why, you know, I was a more entertainment person than journalist. And the thing was that I was really enjoying putting up the old photographs. And I was saying how my love of old photos comes from the fact that I was a little brat. And when the family, you know, they get photographs from all over the world, really, from the country, with relations from Dublin, like to New York and what have you. And they'd send the letter and there'd be a photograph in it. And these letters with photographs would pile up, first to be put on a table, then in a box somewhere. And then eventually they went into, the better ones would go into albums. So being the youngest of the family and a little terror, I was handed an old album to mess with, a kind of an indestructible one, you know, and they'd get on with putting in the new photos in the albums. And I might be handed a landscape or some kind of oddball photograph that didn't belong in an album. And I think that's what gave me my love of photography.
Right.
And especially for landscape. And as I got older, I started to inquire about the old photos.
Yeah.
And you found that there was a great story attached to it.
Yeah.
But that was kind of the stories that would come from these photos, old photos.
That's what stuck with you, Dermot.
That really did stick with me, and it had a big influence.
And did you love photos all throughout your life, say from that stage when you were only young?
Yeah, I think it was probably it was always in me.
Yes.
And having a look at the old photos brought it out in me.
Yeah.
But I always did, and that led me, I always liked to collect postcards. And that's an influence on me in my photography that I think somewhere along the line, it might have been a school tour, I seen Turner's paintings and his dramatic landscapes and his use of colour and depth. Just everything about it, I just always, that's my reference point. And then funny with postcards, because postcards would give you old images, but they remind me of holidays. And if you were in town here and you walked into Christy Wynn's shop, right, there was a rack there with lovely colourful postcards. And these were mostly by a man called John Hind. And John Hind, he was a gifted photographer, but he always brought out the very best of a place because this was a postcard. And so he has lovely images of Lough Key. There's one of the kids feeding the deers and boats, of course. And if you look at them, he was trying to attract people's eye. So that rack had really bold primary colours. Red, blue and green really stand out. And his photographs, he'd have the really blue sky. He always photographed in midsummer, you know, and
when everything was beautiful.
Everything, you know how good the thing looks. So you have strong green, strong blue, and he'd always put in a red jumper or a red car or a boat with strong blues and reds on it. And that John Hind colour, it was even mentioned to me, a photograph I had up, and a friend of mine said, just, you know, on the comments, he said, "Oh, very John Hind."
Really?
Yeah. And I said, "Oh, you have me there. That's me."
And did you have the primary colours in it?
Always. I always, the vibrancy and the saturation is always up with me.
Yes.
And even when I'm taking the photograph, that's sort of I'd probably have seen something that in a photo and said, "I must do that, I must try that." And then if I see, I'm very fortunate because we have the Rigna Miners Way walk. And so I'm very involved with that. And I might be out on the walk, and you just, the vistas, the views are just, they're
unbelievable.
Aren't they?
I actually spoke with, I don't know, was it a lorry driver or someone that drove a lot anyway, over in Scotland, Wales, even in Europe.
Yeah.
And they said there was nothing like the Rigna Mountains.
No.
And he actually said to us, he told us where to go, up the top road maybe, and go behind the visitor centre there.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, once you go over that direction, he said, you won't see views like it anywhere in the world.
I still, I might be popping from Arigna out to Giva.
Yes.
And I'll drive that road up by Glan Church, and it's beautiful. And actually, I know this is a bit of an aside, but when you're driving along there, and all the years I have driven that, I never realised you could see the sea from there.
Can you?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And that kind of started with being up on the highest part of Roscommon and the area is Spine Cop there in Arigna. And the view from there is magnificent. And it wasn't a great day, but it was clear. And I was pointing out, look how high the sea is. And I says, what? You can see the sea? Oh, yeah, of course you can. And especially when you could zoom with your phone. And it's the same looking into the Bay of Sligo when you're coming across from the top road.
Yes.
Along there before you start to drop back down into Giva. Magnificent views of Binbulbin and all of that area and Knocknarea. I made a quote about the views in Arigna that, it's somewhere you can both lose yourself and find yourself nearly in the same instance. And I think that actually from, when you worked in broadcasting and very high pressure situation and like behind the scenes in a radio station, I don't know about now, but it was something similar to a riot.
Right.
It was madness. How it all settled down, and that's something I was just talking about broadcasters, that like actors, you could have all this pandemonium around you and then you could focus in on what you were doing. You see, when they would be filming here in Boyle, how the actor could be in the middle of one thing, especially like somebody like Chris O'Dowd, who's directing and producing, and he's in the middle of the technical side of it all, getting the shot lined up, and then just have to walk in there, get into character, remember your lines and focus. Quite incredible to watch people do that. And in a radio station, it was absolute pandemonium behind the scenes. And so when you'd finished, it was nearly like coming back from the wars, and that wind down time to be able to get back out into the countryside and have that yin and yang, that you had somewhere that you could just breathe.
Yeah.
And get a space, a pause in it all. And that's why I had this other thing going on, that I take out the camera, do a bit of photography,
Did that allow you, Dermot, to switch off then from the other side of things?
Definitely.
Yeah.
And there's a creative side in me that has to kind of be doing something and do something more, maybe a little more abstract, a little more artistic there. Like you can say radio and that is fine, but it, as I said, it was turning more into journalism for me. And we were concentrating more on the sport and all the sort of journalistic part of it. And the music and the entertainment side was taking more and more of a back seat. And that's what eventually led me to move away from working on radio. And it wasn't just that, but there was a decision about, like every couple have, about the family, who's going to be with the kids. And my lifestyle suited being with the kids an awful lot more than Margaret's. My wife Margaret was working in the Royal Hotel at the time, and hers was very much, a structured set of hours. And I was able to kind of be around that. And, it's funny how we talk about being the first of things, but I would be the first of kind of being a home partner as a male. And even at that time, for a fella to be pushing a pram, that was a bit odd, to begin
probably
with.
Because it would have been very rare, I suppose.
Yeah, it was. And I come from a time that it was actually looked a little bit at a woman driving a car and owning her own car. And it was kind of accepted that a fella's wife could drive her the car. But actually so that kind of thing, it's such a change and a breath of fresh air to see how, we've got a bit of common sense, about these things. But for me, actually, to have the pushchair and the kids at the time, and it was just beginning to be accepted that I would be the one going to the parents-teacher meeting.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
But I loved it because it again, you were getting a change of life, really, And I think it's great now looking back that that time you can't buy back.
Oh, 100%. 100%. And that's precious time that you had with your kids at that time that many dads didn't have, simply because their roles were reversed and structure was more part of their day, even though they might have liked, obviously, to have that time.
Everybody did. And I mean, that's the thing. I've seen it with parents with tears in their eyes for a mum now even going out to work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they're leaving the little toddler and whatever. And, it's that thing. But I was just thinking, looking there, we were doing a little bit of babysitting and we had to head off early in the morning. And how busy the roads are now, at 5 and 6 in the morning, with people having to work those extra hours, to keep
things running,
going, and it takes a couple bringing in wages to keep a modern house going, and that's the very hard that's the hard part of it. So I consider myself to have been always very lucky, and I think that was the case too with the discos and all of that. I remember we got a record player, and there came a few records with it, but one of our neighbours had a Beatles record. And when you put that on, the sound of it was, as compared to the others were probably Irish-made records, and the production in the studios was not there at the time. So when you got this Beatle record and put it on, the sound of it, coming off vinyl, there was something about it. You could tell there was something about the Beatles at that time, because it hit some part of your brain, and you could see why they brought that. There was excitement in the sound, and it came to the live performances as well. And at that time, we were just seeing the discos were just starting, but it was youth discos. It was for the youth, and there were big discos would come around, based in Dublin and Mullingar, and they would do a show, a bit like the way the youth discos have become now again, where it has to be a big show.
Very regional, like I suppose in my day even, it was Ballinagar and Mohill and even Keiju.
Yes.
They had their odd disco down there as well.
Right.
But now, say my niece, it's Sligo.
Yeah.
And Carrick and Shannon, of course, they had theirs, but I think it's stopped there completely now. So you're right. It needs to be a big thing.
Yeah. And it kind of started, they had to have it a big thing, and to get the numbers and to attract people. But then the halls, the regional halls, and the little local parochial halls, there was lots of them that time, they started seeing the discos as a great, I mean, it worked every way. It was great for the young people, for something to do. And you had the Feroga clubs and the youth clubs and, football clubs, that sort of thing. And so you had this thing where they would have a youth disco, but they couldn't afford a big
DJ
show, big DJ. So that's really how it started, and it was.
Is that how you got into the discos?
Not DJing now, but just helping out, and generally, I suppose, being in the way. Again, being the young fella, tripping over cables was mostly.
But you were still learning how everything goes, how everything works.
That's the thing.
Yeah,
you learned the trade of it, and I mean, the first discos, as you can imagine, were very, very basic, and how that progressed was, I remember one day I was coming out of secondary school, and I went to Drumshambo, and a bus driver shouts over, "Would you know a fella that does discos?" And the thing was, I was with all the crew, and I wasn't going to let myself down and say, "No, well, we have a record player and a couple of bulbs."
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Big fellas, and
not in front of the friends. Yeah.
Not in front of you were not going to let yourself down. So I said, "Give me your number there and I'll get him to ring you." So when I got back, I really had to pressurize this to get it to happen. And the disco was in Fena. Now, Fena's in just outside Ballinamore, but it had kind of a Las Vegas reputation at one time. There was a dance hall called Fenaville.
Right.
And there was a guy who, I think he came back from America, and he had very new ideas. And what happened was a priest gave out from the altar about this place, and he said there was terrible goings on in this hall. And of course, once that...
He was probably right.
He was right, but it was like saying, oh, don't go to Las Vegas.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of, right. Oh, we definitely won't. When can I fly? So it was the same with Fena got this reputation, the old dance hall, but it always kind of kept it. So for the youngsters then to hear that there was a disco in Fena, woohoo.
I have to go.
We have to go. So it had built up in popularity, but the DJ, the disco that was doing it, they were moving up as well. So they were leaving a gap in the market for the likes of us coming on. And so managed to literally beg, borrow, and make. And there was a company in England called Roger Squires, and they did mail order stuff like a light control unit. So before that, we'd been using actually the starters out of fluorescent tubes to flash on and off the lights. That's how we ran a few switches.
Brilliant.
So these were the new electronic light controllers. So we had a 4-way light controller and actually made a kind of a table and stitched together 4 sets of Christmas lights that would flash and kind of give a running effect.
Brilliant.
And you'd seen the dance halls had started to figure out about black light, UV. And so you could buy a fluorescent tube that gave off ultraviolet light. And so we put that in front of our table that had the lights on it, the Christmas lights. And we used actually day glow paper for our lettering on the sign, which lit up like neon when you had the UV under it. So there was an awful lot of creativity went into these things at the time. You just had to, you just couldn't go out and buy it. Like when you think about it, it took us years to build up a disco that you can go online now and have maybe tomorrow.
Yeah.
And affordable. Equipment at that time was very expensive. Like relative to what you would make to do a disco. It really, again, it was the fun of doing it. It when you paid back for the equipment, and all the overheads, and the transport was expensive and so on, and the records themselves, we were playing vinyl records, they were very expensive. You'd be talking about an equivalent of spending, 45, 50 euros for a long player, and probably equivalent of, again, 15, 20 euros for a single song. And there was about 5, 6 coming out every week.
Jeez, so it was big, expensive.
Very expensive. So it just helped pay for your hobby. You could own and go out and buy records that you could only think of buying, but because you had the disco, it was a reason, and you could buy them
as an investment. That was your internet radio station, and then that obviously is where the Facebook page Memory Radio Boyle came from.
Yeah.
And then Dermot, just you also have another page, Best of Memories.
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about that page, how that started, and I suppose the difference between the two?
Yeah, that started because my Best of Memories came about, I should say, because the Memory Radio Boyle page was profile. Facebook came on to me and said, you're more of a business page. And I said, yeah, right, let's move over. And I changed actually over to a community page. But something happened in the changeover, and a lot of the material was lost. Maybe I pressed the wrong buttons, I don't know. But that needed to build up again. And I'd been thinking about the material. At this stage, the Memory Radio Boyle had been going a few years, and there was a lot of photographs and stuff on it. And I thought, let's do a best of. So Best of Memories was kind of Best of Memory Radio Boyle, but I just cut it down to Best of Memories, leaving out the radio and all the rest. And that really took off. And Best of Memories allowed me more scope in what I was doing. And I had a lot of material that I could use. So it really gained momentum. I was able to keep a big push on loads of material going out and a much wider audience. And I'd done, through one thing or another, I'd done some Facebook marketing courses and, media stuff. And there I had a few ideas and good pointers about how you would put together a Facebook page. And funny enough, I tend always to go off on a tangent, but just about that, I then set up the first Facebook pages for the Miners Way Walk.
Oh, right. You set that up.
I set that up initially.
Fantastic.
And you see, there for material, the landscape photography was perfect. And so that's what brought me back into taking these photographs. And I was able then to spread it around sort of because I have my own Facebook page, personal page and Instagram. And so I'd stick those photographs up on those pages as well. So you see, I had this thing going on where I had lots of material to put on Best of Memories, and it could be a nationwide thing. And as well as that, I trained in video editing. And so I had, I always think about this, about decisions. I actually got my video cards from a chap who had enough of Bitcoin mining. So Bitcoin mining is just basically where you store the Bitcoins for the company on your computer. That's kind of how Bitcoins work, this system. And so he had enough of it because he wasn't getting the Bitcoins, and they burn, having a computer on with several video cards in them 24/7, you burn a lot of electricity. And I took these cards away actually from Bitcoins and started doing video work. And I was saying, if I had only just left it mining Bitcoins, I'd be talking to you now in a big... I'd be all the bling.
We mightn't get you. We might have to go on the yacht to get you.
Leave the yacht, and I'd have the big... shaven-headed security guards each side of me and a solicitor telling me what I could and couldn't say.
If only, Dermot, if only.
So that computer actually, that's what it ended up doing. So you can see I'm no John Paul Getty kind of talk about it. But yeah, so I was doing videos on this repurposed computer. And that was taking up a lot of my time. And it was brilliant. They talk about being ahead of the curve accidentally in this case. So again, I never seen Zoom coming. And I was using very similar stuff because I took a piece of software called Hit Film. And it was brilliant. And my interest in photography led me to, I love taking a flat photo and turning it into 3D. And you have that now on Facebook. You'll see an option 3D, yes, right?
Yeah.
But there's a video composite where you literally cut out each layer and each person out of the photograph, and you use a kind of content aware to fill back in the gap. So when you cut somebody out of a photograph, there'd be a blank in it. Well, you can content aware and fill back in that space. And now you can pull that person forward like Disney used it in his animations, where you have layers in front of a background.
Yes.
Almost like, actors on the stage, you have the background, you have a table in the middle and maybe an actor in front of it. And it gives you the depth and perspective. And it brings a real life to a photo to turn it into 3D. And the only thing that was capable of doing it was actually a video editing thing. And the other software would cost you thousands, 30,000, 40,000 for the sort of software that they'd use for a movie or TV broadcast. And this Hit Film was a bunch of the guys who worked at this launched their own software that was affordable. And the only thing is it was extremely complex. And even though I could fly around stuff like Photoshop and knew all the terms, this was like going from sort of a glider to a spacecraft. And when you start working with 3D, it just explodes, even the amount of computer power you need to do this at that time.
And just roughly what time year-wise was that,
I'm
Dermot?
talking about 2015.
Right.
And at that time, so
Even since then, so much like
So much has
Jesus,
changed.
yeah, different world.
And because the software was so complex, it came with, you could go to YouTube tutorials, but they also had online. So I was learning online in 2015. So the whole COVID thing was absolutely nothing new to me. I'd been there and done that, so to speak, and kicked myself again that I never seen the potential in Zoom.
Because that blew up.
That just blew up, and I never seen that coming. I think that's the thing about being maybe into stuff. You just get into it. I never thought at any of these things that I was involved in, the business and the money making side of it,
the potential
never entered my head. I didn't go that direction. Never did. It was never a part of it. And I think actually, to a degree, people can know that. People have a sense of whether something is corporate, and I know.
Or comes from a passion.
Comes from a real person. But yeah, so all of these things, you can see there's a problem with me that I flit from one thing to another. Even in conversation, I'll find I go off a little bit, off subject.
But you're so interested. The one thing that I suppose is striking is you're so interested in what you do and so passionate about it. With the radio, with the music, even the vinyls and the photography, obviously. I just on the video editing, I just went through your pages this morning and I follow both of them, but I just went way, way back. And God, there's some fantastic videos in there.
I was so lucky, and I'm often surprised. A video will go viral again that had been out like that, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. And some of those videos live a life now.
Yeah, there was one even from 2014 from a gig in Winds. I can't think of your man's name now. Was it John something? But it was only 2014, which is obviously 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But it could have been 20 years ago in terms of things look so old and different.
Yeah.
And I think no more than Carlo and that doing the photos and us even doing the podcast, I think the way things are changing so quickly, the more valuable material becomes.
Absolutely.
And I'd say you find that too, even from your own archive of stuff.
Totally. And it's funny about an archive of stuff there. So
do you have everything organised? That's what I was burning to ask you. Or what does that much material look like?
It looks like being given out that the place looks very similar.
Maybe I should ask Margaret.
Bomb site. Margaret will say she's always on to her going doing up a room for the grandchildren and all these card players and
but I bet you know where to find something if you need it.
I do. I only got sent a daughter Tara sent me a little meme there of a fella looking for a piece of timber, to fix something. I know, and he runs down and searches through his workshop and finds a piece of timber he put away like 20 years beforehand. Yeah. I'm a bit like that. I'm very organised with some things, the music and a lot of the stuff on the computer stuff. Yeah.
And Dermot, I suppose I wanted to ask you, obviously it's been very evident during the chat of your love for the past.
Oh, yeah.
And the way things used to work, the equipment, the pictures, the radio shows. So how does that make you feel? Because I know there can be a deep sense of nostalgia attached to these things, and sometimes even for the ordinary person who doesn't have that as much of a deep love as yourself, when you take out the photo album, it makes you feel sad.
Yeah, there is.
Do you have a sense of that, or does it affect you as much?
It did in the beginning, and as you were speaking, I was thinking about this, and I think it's like swimming in the sea. You can drown in it.
Yeah.
And you can easily drown in nostalgia. Whereas, if you just swim in it and enjoy it and maybe keep an eye on the shore. So I have an eye on the future, and I love new technology. I love new things that interest me. And also the past is nearly a limitless landscape. You can go in any direction and there's so many things. And for me at the minute, I got always had a huge passion about classic cars, and that nostalgia will go back now because I mean, I started with a Ford Escort Mark One. That's a classic car now, and very rare to get a good one. So I picked up a classic car, and to research the history of that. I find that fascinating. So I can pick up an article about the Triumph Motorworks and how that used to be Standard Motor Company and the connection with tractors and all of this. And before I know it, I am utterly lost to the world. But I look at it with curiosity as much as nostalgia. My view of things now looks at a younger generation. I look at my grandkids and think about them and what life is going to be like for them, and hopefully it'll be brilliant. I enjoyed a great life. I hope they have their adventures and fun, and that we'll have preserved a few things that as they drift into their middle age, it'll happen that they'll have these things, and that has been preserved. And I do think thank you, I mean, to the people here that preserved what we have. The people that preserved Boyle Abbey made sure that a funny one about that. I'll tell you a story about Boyle Abbey now. I came into town here in Boyle when the cinema was going, see a film.
This is now the old cinema, or Better Buys?
Crescent.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the old Crescent cinema, which kind of became Better Buys, right? But a friend, because motorbikes were so unreliable really too, and you might get a spill off one of them. You usually travelled in twos. And there was a region, like people think, motorbike packs. But there was a reason too that one of them nearly inevitably broke down. So that happened on my friend's bike. And lucky enough, his aunt was working as a caretaker or a housekeeper, for the priests here in Boyle. And we were able to use the garages there that's in the car park. And he knew where the key was, and we were able to roll in his bike that had broken down, was punctured. And so anyway, we went home on my bike, came back the next day, and we fixed his bike.
Right.
And at the time, the new church was built and open, but they were working on the stonework of it, new stuff going on. And there was all sorts of scaffolding up, and we had closed the garage. And of course, being in the overalls, this lady thought we were part of the building. And she said, "Will you soon be finished this?" I said, "We only have to knock another gable end out of the abbey and we'll have enough stones." I remember my friend was in, "We better get out here quick," because she kind of expanded. And I could see there was stones coming out from under her shoes heading to the priest's house. "Are you knocking the abbey?" He says, and that was the fun, you know what I mean, that you'd have at that time, And like Boyle here was such a brilliant place to come to.
Yeah.
It was so vibrant, and you had the festivals going on. You had the cinema, the dance halls, and we were then started playing the discos in the Royal.
Yes.
And that was, we could spend another week just talking about the Royal Hotel.
Yeah. Do you have any standout memories, Dermot, that you can share, or...
Yeah, I think meeting Boy George was one of them things, and people didn't realise that there were
in the Royal Hotel.
In the Royal Hotel, yeah.
Stop.
He was friends with a lad out the road, and that's. I just leave that there, right? Because that with
right.
Boy George, as you know, there was a bit of controversy always kind of surrounded him, but he actually happened to be in Boyle, and he wasn't done up in the garb, that you see him as. He was a bit there, but. Remember that the Royal Hotel at this time, the new wave, new romantic was in. So there was lots of people with eyeshadow and dressed in that new romantic style. That was the big selling point of people would say, how were people so into this? But you had a youth culture that had no way really of expressing themselves. And here was the disco in the Royal, where we were playing that music. And so people could come in and dance to the new stuff, the Duran Duran, Spandau Ballet, Human League, and if anyone remembers the Human League, they had a fair look to themselves. And so Boy George didn't stand out, if you know what I mean. And how it happened was there was a football match on, and we were there. The disco was set up. I'd helped set up the disco. I was knocking around, and there's no one about. And
what year was this, or do you remember?
This would be early 80s. I'm trying to. So at the time, you know, that Phil Oakey look of Human League and all that. They were 80, 81. Right. So this was before Boy George broke. He broke the charts into them with in 1982. Do You Really Want to Hurt Me? Was what launched him. He had been doing, I think, in the Hacienda Club. He was the looking after the cloakroom.
Oh, God.
You know, and but there were so many people of that time and around there that emerged as pop stars later on. Another guy, Steve Strange, and he went on, and Trevor Horn. They all went on then to be, Trevor Horn would be known with the Buggles first, and then with Frankie Goes to Hollywood. And he was one of the big producers. Heaven 17 and all these people used, you know, he produced for them. And so in a way, the Royal had a little bit of that about it. And we didn't realise until years afterwards how it would be talked about, how it was very special. To hear people like Mel Gibson was there, and he's related to the Higginses there on the Curlews.
Never knew that.
Yeah, and you know, and there was so many people, and Boyle seems to have that. You could be knocking around here, and as you know, you can meet somebody like Chris O'Dowd and
Brendan Gleeson,
and all these people, you know, are in and around, and it was nothing to meet Brendan Gleeson and Colin Farrell in for breakfast with us. But it was lovely because I made so many friends here, and eventually met my wife.
Yeah, in the Royal.
In the Royal. Margaret worked in the Royal. And so I always loved coming here. There was always a great buzz about the town. And that thing of having that new romantic image, we'll say, and a youth culture, it was really special. And, you know, again, when we talk about the sort of the juxtaposition, the yin and the yang for me in life. So at that time, I was holding down a full-time job working in the mines. And I was working there doing maintenance a lot of, but it was a small family business. So, you know, with a family business and anything like that, there's times it's all hands on deck, and whatever needed to be done would be done. And the mine was supplying the power station, which was coal burning, and they weren't actually hooked up to the grid all the time. They would be on maintenance and other things. So when we got the opportunity to supply coal, you had to have it ready and there. And the days they were accepting coal and we were sending the lorries down, you know, everything had to be all go. And for ourselves, like mining is a thing too, where there's days you have lots of coal and days everything is broken and you're fixing and on maintenance and all of this. And I could be very busy, and we worked on a Saturday. Our working week was a Monday was off. So we worked Tuesday to Saturday. And I could be like, my eyeshadow was pretty real because I was out of a Friday night, maybe until 3, and at work at 8 o'clock in the morning.
You had the black rings.
I had the black rings and the coal dust even for a bit of mascara, you know, and cool makeup. And if you knew, I'm dying on the 2 legs, you know. So you had this gritty, really hard work and dangerous, and you had to have your eyes open. And this is the thing that comes from a rig now, where I love the community spirit. Really strong there too, because we worked together in the mines, and you had to look out for the other person, and they looked out for you. You were not allowed to go underground on your own. We had a hillman, and he would be counting he had an account of every man that was underground, where you were, what you were doing. You signed in, you signed out. And even if I was coming with somebody to do maintenance, where we would be looking after maybe the water pumps to keep the mines from flooding. And so I could finish from being here in Boyle at a gig and jump in the car. And that was like communications worked 2 ways. That had found me on the CB and said, can you go out and just check the water pumps? So I'd have to stop and get the man who was in charge of the hill, get him. and the two of us go off into the mine and check the water pumps, and me, just still at that time with the smoke, and he said, wow, you were in the clubs anyway, because you would smell
you
like
were
an
only on the way
ashtray.
home.
I'd be only on the way home, and so you had these, it was amazing how you could be immersed in so many different worlds. One minute you're in this bouncing nightclub, and the next minute you're there. If you've been in the mining experience, it's pretty rough, and you're in a mine, and you have to go down there and go through floods of water. You wouldn't want to be claustrophobic by any means, and I'd always say to people, don't be afraid to go into the mining experience or go underground. It's 100% safe.
Oh, yeah.
It really is. Where the only danger for us was when you're at the cold face, where you were disturbing the earth and you were pumping out water and doing all this sort of stuff, and where there were explosives. This was a dangerous place to be. But now that it's
lovely.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's lovely.
But it does give a very true. It's exactly like the mine that I worked in, where you had this sandstone tunnel and the seam of coal. And that, though, combined with the fact that I grew up on a farm, meant that I could go from this farming life and in Origno, beautiful scenery. I could be out in the fresh air. And I think it's why farmers or miners kept farming. There was a statement made by a man when he was interviewed for the paper. He said, a miner kept a farm, but a farm would never keep a miner, and they were small farms. And that's where I grew up. And that's why people worked in the mines there, because it supplemented their income in the winter. It was like, if you look at the weather now that has passed, you can't go out working on the farm, but you could go underground and work there. So an awful lot of the men worked in the farm. That's how during the summer. And if you look at it before the power station, the demand for coal was in the winter time. So you worked the farm and did all the farm work in the summer, and worked the winter time then in the coal mines. Yeah. And the original mines, the mines are full of coal down there. Like, people think they were mined out, they're not. It's full of coal in Origna. And even small coal, because they could only sell the big lumps of coal originally. So even the old mines are full of slack and pebble-sized coal. Just left there, just never sold.
Jeez, we'll not tell Eamon Ryan that, will we?
Oh, no. Eamon wouldn't like that at all. And we still have the coal business there in Origna, like with the Origna Fuels. And
yes,
I was only noting there's a change there now where they're using more organic, But they were the things that I always seem to be moving around, where I could be working in the mines, I could be on the farm, could be up on a radio station, we'd be on our CB radios.
Into the Royal
for a gig there. And, I think that's what though kept you going too.
Yeah.
And I think of the energy that you were able to
but sure, it sounds
burn.
wild,
It was. Yeah.
Just such a difference in experiences growing up,
It really was. And like the pleasure, there's the thing there about the discos, there's a great pleasure. Like when you have a place up and that feedback you get. And I have a lot of energy, and had an awful lot of energy then. So you bring the energy with you. I look at people now and like one name I'm going to mention, somebody I really admire in broadcasting, is Anne Norris, that works on Shannon's side.
Right.
And I started at the same time as Anne. And I've never in all my life met such a professional person. She is so focused. And there's a devilment in me, that I was always, when we worked on Shannon's side, she'd be like you sitting there, right? She was in a booth, right? It was just a small booth that the newscaster came into. And we'd be in an on-air studio. And then there was a recording studio for doing the ads one side of it, and then another studio for the discussion and debate. And sometimes she'd have somebody in to interview them, or there would be tapes that needed to be played for the news. So the DJ would be producer at this stage. And I'd be doing everything in my power to make Anne laugh. And especially on the, like the death notices now, and like that was the devilment that was in me. And your initiation into the stations was, you were prepared for it when you knew, but you'd be reading out something, again, very serious information. And somebody would quietly, you're focused on the page, they put a cigarette lighter to the corner of it, and you realise then it's on fire and you have to get it read and finished.
And stay calm.
And stay calm and get it read before the thing burned. And I suppose it was a way of focusing you maybe, and saying you need to be able to be calm while the world falls apart around you.
And did you have to do that many times then? Several times, I'd say.
Oh, yeah, because I worked around on a lot of stations, and you still would get caught out, you'd be so, because you're focused on it. And I'm the sort of person that I do not read very well first time out. If you let me read it and then read it back, no problems. But I hate it when we had to do read stuff on air where it was job announcements, or somebody would just hand you and say, get that out, to be a soccer result or something, or a score. And I always hated that. That was something that I didn't like. And I think that whole thing, that whole journalistic thing, didn't work for me, I look back at it and I would say, if there's anything you would kind of take from this, is that time spent, on other people is not time wasted. It's actually what you were, I think, put here to do. And this thing of we've become more and more insulated. Social activity, and even like people say, well, we've got sports, but sports is competitive. And it's regulated. And I think a bit of freedom to express yourself, freedom to move, freedom to find out what you want. Because I even find a lot of people, they go to college, they will have studied hard, they got a degree in something, and they find out it's not what they want. It's not really what they're about. You need that room to express yourself, where you might be very technical but find out you love being very artistic.
Yes.
And I think that that flow of conversation that you had at all the local things, like we only tend now to meet at funerals. And that even the nightclub scene has changed dramatically too. And I don't seem to see the same sort of crack, as we'd say, that was in the pubs.
No, Dermot, no. I think especially the younger generation, because of social media and phones and cameras, they don't want to be letting loose or letting go and kind of enjoying themselves, because they're afraid of it being put up online and them maybe looking stupid or something. And
it can affect maybe a future career. It could end your career in something you did. I mean, that's what I think of. Thank God there weren't really cameras around. People say, have you much memories? Nothing that you could really tell anyone about, or show them, and the photographs. It's funny, I'd mentioned to people that had pubs, and I'd say, would you have old photographs in there? And no.
Yeah, they're not. They're not going out.
They are not for consumption. And there was like a great sense of freedom that you don't seem to feel now. Everything is very organised.
Yes.
Health and safety is great, but it means that it's very formulaic. The spontaneity of things, hasn't. It's not there. And even mentioning discos, you see, the discos were kind of spontaneous things in what you would play. Now, different areas had different tastes in music, most definitely. And you did play a different show. If you were playing in Boyle, your show was very different to the show you played in Carrick, in Cartown.
Okay.
Every area would have different fans of music. So where you would have a certain amount, we used to say the Cure heads. Where, you know what I mean? You know that Cure head? And nearly goth Cure.
Yes.
Then there was the rock, and the rock heads, we'd say, and the heads. And then you had other things where your dance was coming in as well. And then you had the general, as would be described, handbag music. The dance around the handbag, nothing wrong with that. Your ABBA and all of this stuff, right? Great music and party music. And the art was to mix that. But you would definitely go a direction depending on what the crowd were asking you, for. And we were like that we'd play the requests. One of the big things that talk to people and say, oh, what about Parker's nightclub?
Yes.
That was cloakroom work as much as everything else, because everyone you knew would say, oh, Dermot, will you mind me coat for me? I'd have a pile of coats. 20 foot high, and exaggerating here, but we would have a pile of coats, and I'd have to give it some of the lads that would be with me. And just about that, helpers right at the disco, because I started out as a helper at the disco. But a famous one happened with us where we were doing a 21st birthday party, and it went too late, and the guards came in to clear the house. And we'd say to everyone, here, take a microphone stand and say you're with the disco, and bring the gear out to the van outside, So we were handing everybody a cable, a light, anything
Something.
at all to get them out,
Yeah.
And, and now, you see, the guards at that time, they took everything in good humour too. And it you know what I mean? It was just, they were just fulfilling a duty they had to do. And one of the guards, anyway, of course, is a lad, very unlikely to be with the disco. An old fellow was coming out with a microphone stand.
And probably a pint on the other hand.
Exactly. And he said, I'm with the band. He says, who's playing here tonight? Is it Glyn Miller? So is this Glyn Miller and his orchestra that's playing here tonight? He said, or have you the Royal Philharmonic? Because I never seen as many people associated or working with it. I'm with the band.
Brilliant.
And that was it. That was always a lovely part of it, especially with the youth discos. And there'd be lads there, they hadn't a penny. And we'd be setting up, and you'd say, here, bring in the gear, come on in with us. And you know what I mean? And they were lovely lads, and they were great. And they'd keep an eye, because screwing out bulbs out of the things wasn't unheard of. So they'd keep an eye for you, and they were great. And they'd go down and they'd say, well, there's a lot of them asking for this song. And
they were the little feelers.
They were the feelers, yeah.
Oh,
and they were lovely. And it's lovely to meet people afterwards that you might have let in, and
thanks for that.
Thanks for that. And it's lovely to when I meet people a lot of the time, the first thing is always a laugh. One fella said to me, we had a lovely get together there. I think it was around 2018 or that. But I'll tell you what it was. It was 2018 because it was the anniversary of the pirate radio stations being closed down. 89 seen the transition to licensed radio. So some opened in 89, most opened in 90. And these were the people that had worked on the unlicensed radio, and we all had a get-together in Jury's in Dublin. And it was amazing to see the people who had worked on radio. Some of them actually autographed the old transmitters as they were leaving. And you'd see, and I was surprised actually, a lovely chap who lives, funny enough, we'll name drop here again, but is connected with Leitrim, and has a house there, right? And near Dowra. And Ballinadlera is actually the area. And Brian Dobson, the newsreader,
yes,
he worked as a placement when he was training as a journalist. He told us he was put down on some of the radio stations in Wicklow by the newspaper to get experience in journalism. And so we're all meeting all these people, all the people who worked on all of the, as we call, pirate stations all over the country. We all met. And the reason how I was there was these chaps heard our radio station on a freak kind of signal thing in Scotland, and they came and they looked at all the pirate stations that were operating in the country, and they included a photograph of me that got included. It was actually on the 6-1 News when they were talking about an exhibition that was on and this get-together. And so I was up there and I was talking to people who I knew from various stations. And they all said, it's so funny with you. Everyone that walks up to you, the first thing to do is just laugh and say, do you remember? Or you?
Yeah. You were the messer.
You were the total, the class clown, really.
Yeah.
But the messer, we used to, you know, and it was so much fun. That was a great day to meet so many people again who, since then, a lot of people, because I mean, I'm talking about from the early 80s. And although I'm going to try and make myself as young as possible, but I was very young. These guys were, you know, in their 30s and 40s. And so they're elderly men. And a lot of those names that, you know, starting to retire and pass away. I think, though, in reality, that linear broadcasting, it's fading out. It's like one of these things. I think it's a little bit more like continental drift, if you know what I mean, rather than an earthquake. So what I mean by that is you don't notice that things are drifting apart and that they're moving away. But I think that linear broadcasting and even FM broadcasting, it's starting to become very dated. Local radio is going that way. People are tuning in for things like the death notices. They're tuning in for a football match maybe.
Yeah.
And in between,
not much is happening.
Not much is really happening. And I find that the podcast like this is great. You can stop and start it when you want to. Yeah, have a listen to it, you know, wherever. And I feel that this is the broadcast of today. This is really what community radio and everything, what they set out to do. And there were limitations of doing what they were doing then. And really, it's like everything else. And this is brilliant, like to get a podcast and say something that lasts up there. And
this is it. You can listen back in so many years' time, and your grandkids can listen into it, and even, you know, hear about obviously your time everything that you just talked about. So it's lovely. Yeah, because
my grandkids have a brilliant time with me because you can gather a lot of the time. I'm still a child at heart.
Yeah, and they love a bit of a messer.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Adults are too serious these days.
They really are, and they have to be. And anyway, like just to mention about that now, that you say with grandkids, it's a second shot, and you're not as concerned. Like if you have the responsibility of a child and bringing them up and having them right, you know what I mean? And that it's a huge responsibility, and you can't let things go a certain way. Whereas grandparents, not at all. Walk away, you know.
They're the devils, aren't they?
Yeah.
They bring the devilment.
Because you probably see in the longer term, you know, that it's about being happy and you know.
There it is, yeah.
You know, that's the side of it. And I seen that, and we're very lucky with, you know, when we had my mum and dad and in-laws looking after the kids as well, you know, that they had an absolute ball of a time, you know. And I was just saying about the photographs and things that comes up in the town here. We had so many things going on from the activities for the kids, you know, ranging through the scouts. There was so many things going on that aren't as subscribed, we'll say, as they are now. And that's only just an example. There were so many other things, from, you know, down playing tennis. And we were just saying, though, about the pool rooms here and snooker.
Oh, yes.
Do you remember that?
Carlo talks about them. Him and his dad used to go.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Reto was an outstanding pool player.
Yeah, he still is.
And I think darts as well. I'm not sure, but darts as well. Yeah, outstanding. You know, and that was a thing that, you know, you don't have that now. So when I'd be collecting the kids from school, you could pop into the pub, right, where their granddad was behind the bar. There was a crew in, and you just go down and have a chat for 10 minutes, play a game of pool, you know, and that kind of interaction. And that you don't have that now.
No, and it's sad, Dermot, isn't it?
I think it is. Like, people say, oh, pub culture and all this. But, you know, it served a purpose, and it meant that people were more used to socialising in face to face.
100%.
Yeah. We used to have so much crack with the lads like that, for just go in and the yarns were going, you know, and you'd hear, so there was always a funny story going on.
Yeah.
We can't mention them here because the stories that would be told in the pub were kind of what happens in Vegas.
It stays there. Well, look, Dermot, I'm conscious of time, so we'll start to wrap things up now, but I just want to say thank you so much for your time. There's so much in there now that I think...
Your head is spinning.
Well, no, I think the one thing I've taken away from it, as I said, is the importance of trying different things when you're younger and being allowed to develop those interests. Because look at all those interests you had when you were a young boy. They're still with you today. And even when you talk about the radio, like your eyes light up. It's just in you. And I think that's lovely. So is there anything else, Dermot, that we haven't talked about that you'd like to talk about? Or if there's a bit of advice out there that you'd like to give people or anything at all?
To keep it simple, my dad gave me great advice. You know, he said, try and express yourself. That's what people need to do. Above all, everything else, find some way to express yourself, and you'll always be happy. And it might be, you know, it's a cliched thing to say, if you're doing what you really love, it doesn't feel as much like work. And thanks for not listening.
Well, people will listen to this, hopefully.
Hopefully. I hope I don't bring the blight. But that's, you know, how all the photographs and everything came by.
Yeah.
That just people didn't listen to the internet radio station. And it was it was great fun doing it.
Yeah.
And there may be
but you'll never regret it.
Oh no, you always regret what you never did.
Yeah.
If you do it, then you know the reasons why.
Yeah.
Never always have why not.
Yeah.
Say and do it. But yeah, that's the thing, to find an outlet for your energy and creativity. And there are things there that you know will come to you a lot of the times. As you can see, things are like nearly wise in the road, that you're heading one direction, but you find that this is the direction to go. And in life, you talk about crossroads. They are kind of, but I call them more like V's, you know, where and you can run things parallel, and you don't have to make an absolute drastic change to begin with. You can veer a little and veer again, and then finally you're at right angles, and that, or maybe do a complete turnabout in what you actually do in life, because life can be very long if it's boring.
Yeah.
You know, and very short when it's fun.
Yeah.
You know, it flies. Like when I talk about all these things, you blink and you miss it. You know, I think if you talk about the influences on me and the kids, I love watching Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You
know what he says? You know, take a while to look around because life passes you by is a great line in that. But it's kind of that fun side of me as well. Yeah, there's your answer. Watch Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Well, thanks a million, Dermot. Thanks a million for joining us on the podcast.
It's been an absolute delight.
Thanks so much.